I had a younger Dharma friend over a few days ago. She was asking lots of questions, and it got my mind going on this topic, which kind of also comes up in forums on Reddit and on Facebook and so forth. Um, what are some words of advice, to younger women in particular, coming into interested in Tibetan Buddhism, Vajrayana, and so forth now, 2021? And I do have a few things to say. Actually, more than I can do in my half hour today. Feel free to jump in the comment box and say hi, ask questions, make your own observations, and share your experiences. I welcome them. So, just as background, I'm a very traditional practitioner in the Nyingma school of Tibetan Buddhism. Obviously, I wasn't raised, I'm not Tibetan, and I wasn't raised in a Buddhist family. Actually, I came to Buddhism when I was around 30. And before that time, I was a feminist. I was surrounded by lesbians and feminists who looked like me. And I had developed, however, been searching through my 20s for a intact tradition, a path of practice to enlightenment. How in the world did I get such an idea? Let me make sure my volume's up. Oh, yeah, it is. How would anybody even have that thought? I don't know. I think maybe we all have, who get involved in this path, have maybe some kind of past life background. That's my thinking. That creates, I had an image of a woman in a cave practicing sort of in my mind, solitary practice. And I wanted a proven, tried and true tradition. And I was attracted by the female imagery, particularly in the Nyingma tradition, the history of female saints in the tradition. And that's what drew me in. And then I came in contact, I started practicing and learning about Buddhism in general, and eventually I came in contact with wonderful, amazing teachers, Buddhist priests called lamas. Here in the United States, I didn't study abroad like so many people did. I'm at the tail end of the baby boom, and I want to mention some of the pioneers, these women, Western women who went to Tibet and Nepal in the 60s and 70s. And because of them, they'd already written books and so forth when I came in the early 90s. Some of them were teachers in their own right by then. There's the nuns, such as Jetsam Tenzin Palmo, Karma Lekshe Somo, Tupten children, Pema children. And then there were the lay women practitioners, such as Sotra Malioni, Anne Klein, Sangye Khandro, Chaita Khandro, Lama Yeshe Wangmo, Lama Sarah Harding, Lama Tsering Everett, and all their peers, who were very strong leader types of women, very bold, and they really immersed themselves in Tibetan Buddhism 50 years ago. And I came in only 30 years ago, so I'll always be the baby. I hope I'll always be the baby, and all these women live really long, healthy lives. Tibetan Buddhism in the Nyingma tradition for lay people, is largely centered on the Vajrayana path, the Tantric Buddhist path. And that path requires faith and devotion, and seeing the teacher very purely, seeing your peers very purely, and trusting your teacher. So you can see, so this has been very rewarding for me. It's been it's been the greatest thing that ever happened to me, that I found good teachers. I put my trust in them. I followed their instructions about how to practice. I learned and studied along with them under their guidance as much as someone can. I mean, I'm not an important person. These lamas had, dozens or hundreds of students. I'm not special. But I tried to give whenever I could, I got personal advice, and then I tried to put their group advice into practice and let it penetrate my heart. And I have absolutely no regrets, and my experience was very good. However, not every person's experience is very good at this time. And as background, I want to give a little history for those of you who don't know. So just very quickly, Tibet was taken over by communist China fully in 1959, and the government fled to India, and many, many people fled, including many wisdom teachers of the Vajrayana tradition, and they and their students risked life and limb to bring the texts and restore the lineages and transmissions, which are like a living thing in the new places, rebuild monasteries and practice spaces in exile in India, Nepal, and so forth. So it was heroic what they did. And many people died coming over the Himalayas at those times, from 59 on through until the past, maybe about 10 years ago, that avenue of escape got largely cut off. And some people stayed, and there is Tibetan Buddhism in Tibet, which is now part of China, and it's very much monitored and controlled by the central government of China. So they have oppression to deal with, and the people in exile, the incredible, vibrant Tibetan people have established themselves in a diaspora all over the world, including here in the United States. And so I want to express my gratitude to the Tibetan people and the lamas. I'm so, so glad that but for your misfortune of needing to leave Tibet, that of your grandparents, and we got to participate. We got to really actively become part of Tibetan Buddhism, Vajrayana students and disciples to the best of our abilities. That being said, now nowadays, being spread all over the world, there's no licensing board for Tibetan Buddhist lamas, Western or Eastern. And this Vajrayana, the very power of the Vajrayana path is in this trust in a guide. And whenever you really empower one person, it can go one of two ways, right? It can become an incredibly wonderful, nurturing environment, very personal. And on the other hand, it can become a cult, Western or Eastern, like any religion, where you place a lot of emphasis on one person and their holiness, their wisdom. If they aren't properly trained in how to constantly revitalize their own humility, it can kind of cultivate a narcissism. There's not narcissistic personality disorder, which is innate to certain brain types, but a kind of cultivated, just human beings. If a lot of people around us giving us adulation, we can become full of pride, and we can think we're really more than we are. And that can, we're very familiar now with the whole way that cults evolve, right? This has happened. Oftentimes it'll be an inner circle, and I'm going to use as an example the inner circle around Sogyal Rinpoche, and where there was a lot of physical and sexual and verbal abuse of people who really got close to that Lama. Meanwhile, people surrounding, on the outside didn't know, may not have known that that was going on, had a very pure view of everything. I'm saying that because it's well known. So here's how to, here's this. I'm just going to repeat some general guidance about how to avoid cults in any religion. First of all, the characterizing features is it's a high control environment. Okay, so people are, you're really feeling under the control of the top dog or their minions. And there is these signs of narcissism. The feeling the leader is infallible. There's secrecy about the teacher, particularly about their sex life. There's lies going on about things that make you feel crazy because you know they're true. You've seen something happen, and then there's lies covering it up or reframing things in a bizarre way. There's defensiveness, especially about anything about criticism about the leader or the organization is that's met with like, you're a traitor, you need to be kicked out or controlled. There's an emphasis on over volunteering or constant aggressive fundraising for these organizations that grow up around narcissist cult leaders. There's an exclusivity about what books you can read. So you look in the bookstore of the organization, they only have their teacher there. Or you can't, you have to feel like you have to go to the teacher to ask things about your personal life, like, should I change jobs? I mean, not that you, of course you always can, but it's expected that they control your personal life, who you marry and so forth like that. And there's feeling the ends justify the means, so the goals of the organization supersede your whatever harm may be done. There's intimidation to enforce obedience, and there's a lot of shame and guilt in those organizations. On the other hand, there are very positive organizations that tend to be characterized by low control. Low control. Advice is given when someone asks for it. The teacher thinks, I really want to know about this thing. Then they go to the teacher and ask, or they go to the appointed person. Instead of unsolicited advice and conformity being complied with. The leader is humble and acknowledges mistakes and models collaboration, gratitude for help in relation to other people. The leader's personal life and sex life, of course, every little detail. People deserve privacy, but generally we know whether they are truly a monk, celibate, whether they have a wife, whether they date multiple women, which is not against the law for a single person, and that kind of thing. What the parameters are is well known, not hidden, and volunteering and donating are not pressured. You're not pressured into doing that. You're free to explore all paths. Of course, you may ask for guidance, and the teacher may say, it's not time to, this isn't, my opinion is that it wouldn't be so great to go do that right now, You are free to leave at any time without shaming or shunning, right? So you can check inside your heart and see so all religious organizations may have subtle aspects of some of these things, but you have to look at the predominance of it and the overall flavor of a cultish organization, a dangerous organization, is control, one means or another. So look for those, in my opinion, look for the low control organizations if you want to have a healthy relationship to your Sangha and your teacher. I want to say a few words about Tibetan culture, and I really am treading on thin ice here. I am so grateful to Tibetan people, and I so enjoy their culture. Um, and I don't, it's kind of I'm a little bit out of place talking about Tibetan culture. We really should have some of my Tibetan friends come on and talk about differences that they see. I hope to do that sometime. But I think that things that they've said to me, and I've also noticed, are I just want to bring your attention to because they may not be obvious. So when you think about Tibetan culture, the obvious things may be, happy, smiling people, prayer flags, going to puja, wearing chubas, loving families, um, and those are all true. Um, but there's also different values that aren't necessarily bad or good, but they're different than mainstream American values. So, for example, the the smiling, happy face means you're always focusing on the positive, and you don't really bring up subjects that are hard. Conflict might be avoided. You tell me if there's some Tibetan people watching right now. But what I've observed is that politeness is very important. Speaking, always being positive is important, and not talking about things that are unpleasant, such as crime, rape, you know, alcoholism, mental illness, things that are, not happy, may not be spoken about. Then family structure is different than ours. Tibetan Bhutan, they had the opposite. I always forget which is which, where in one country women had multiple husbands, and in the other country men had multiple wives. Sometimes I get it mixed up in my head, but just suffice to say, this culture in the United States was founded by Puritans. Now, of course, many people come in from all over countries, all over the world, but there's a big, strong value on monogamy. This kind of, and that is very internalized in many of us from who live here in the United States, and so it's not necessarily given in Tibetan families. And also, older men married women that were much younger in Tibetan society. There were in traditional society, and this is of course changing in some places, but men had certain roles. These are agricultural communities. Men had certain very specific roles, and women had very specific roles. So if you go to a modern Tibetan community like Dharamsala, this is changing. When people wanted to change, they may play different kinds of roles in society. And then there's I remember one Lama emphasizing, how, to me, that somebody close to him had, started a blog and started talking about their personal life on the internet. And this was inconceivable to him because there's an innate feeling of modesty, which we could learn something from, right? And dignity, where sharing your emotions and your personal life with everybody in the world would be considered, at least by the older generation, to be very strange. Very, very strange. There's in Tibetan Buddhism, you'll see a love of pageantry, which if you come out perhaps of a Catholic background, you might see that. But for many of us, it's quite beautiful and it's quite different, and maybe we like it. Maybe we're not so drawn to it. And then, a lot of I think you probably know that a lot of Tibetan lamas, priests, are monks, and a lot of them are not monks. They have families. They are not celibate. And these days, it used to be they wore different attire. And this varied from valley to valley, region to region, exactly how this worked. But generally, the in-depth yogis had long hair, the men, and the women had, and the monks had shaved heads. But nowadays it's sort of everybody has a shaved head, very short hair, so you really have to ask whether this Lama is a monk or not. And that's an important fact about their life that you should know. I'm here talking about getting involved in Tibetan Buddhism with Tibetans, not going to an American or European Dharma center with a Western teacher. The role of the Lama's wife traditionally was very much like a woman's life in the early 60s here in the United States, raising children, cooking food. These were all honorable, venerable talents and skills. Cleaning, managing the finances, maintaining the relationships with family and others, being an intermediary between people and the Lama, a kind of a gatekeeper, like that. And so this may be unfamiliar, and I'm saying this because some women have a fantasy that they want to marry a Tibetan Lama, and that's great. There's nothing wrong with that. I mean, it's neither great nor bad, that's what you want. It obviously wasn't my fantasy. But be prepared. It may or may not be the expectations of a younger Lama these days. You have to be aware that there's just a tremendous cultural gap between Tibetan and American people. And we can learn a lot from the dignity, from modesty, humility, focusing mainly on the positive. These are all things that we could stand to learn from. So, but you don't have to become Tibetan in order to become involved in Tibetan Buddhism. You can be yourself. That's fine. So I have 5 main tips for particularly young women or new women to Vajrayana Tibetan Buddhism. First is practice the Bodhisattva Yana first. What is a Bodhisattva Yana? Most of what I teach, virtually all of what I teach on this YouTube channel is a Bodhisattva Yana. Me and every Zen teacher, a lot of Tibetan Lamas focus on the Bodhisattva path. Yana means vehicle. Bodhisattva means this great awakened hero who practices in order to attain enlightenment for the benefit of all sentient beings equally. And if you don't have that kind of background and you jump into Vajrayana, I think that's really courting danger because you don't really understand the context. You don't understand how to evaluate what you're seeing. Everything, Vajrayana is a way to attain the goal of the Bodhisattva much faster through specific practices and techniques and this relationship with a teacher, mentor, guru, whatever you want to call him or her. I really think, not forever, you don't have to go on for 20 years practicing the Bodhisattva path if you don't want to, but at least get a few years under your belt and get an understanding of the principles of the 6 paramitas, or perfections, of a bodhisattva, and start to do some shamatha and vipassana practice, tonglen, and so forth. Please. Then you decide what it is you want to do, why you're going into Tibetan Buddhism. Be conscious about it. Think, what are my goals for going into this? What qualities do I want to blossom in myself? And how am I going to get them? So this is like not being so passive. I see a lot of women being super passive and just being, whatever happens, happens. But I think, if you, for example, I hope your goal is to attain enlightenment for the benefit of all sentient beings. And you can go on a slow path and fast path, doesn't really matter. But you take an active role, and if you're going to hitch your, like there's expression in the Old West, like hitch your wagon. That's not very, wouldn't be considered very respectful in Tibetan system. See, this is a area culture clash. And then I start thinking, oh my God, that makes a horse, and your horse is pulling you, and they wouldn't like that metaphor. But anyway, you know what I mean. If you're going to make someone your guide star, who's just everything you can imagine in a wisdom teacher, and you really, really trust, ask them before you go and say, Rinpoche, would you be my teacher? Or Lama or Kempo, would you be my teacher? And Lopan, dare I say. Ask them, say, these are my goals. And maybe your goal isn't to do in-depth practice in this life. Maybe your goal is I'd like to learn Tibetan art. I'd like to learn Tibetan medicine. I'd like to become a Vajra dance expert. It could be completely different. I want to learn ritual. You know what I mean? Make sure that Lama can meet your goals, because what happens, and this ties into my next piece of advice, is that there's a lot of large organizations that I think you should stay away from in general, because they're just the nature of a megachurch, of a Buddhist megachurch equivalent, is that they're trying to appeal to a mass audience, and they're putting you through routine programs of level 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 that may not be what you need or what your goals are, and they may not lead. It could be that there's no one there that can actually guide you in Vajrayana practice, study and practice, or even Mahayana study and practice. It may be run by people like you in the local office or chapter of a large organization. In general, large organizations, haven't we learned our lesson from many, many preachers in our own culture who have these drive-in, these huge parking lots around their huge church, and almost inevitably those people have a dive, some kind of, they're turned out to be prostitutes or drugs or whatever, and the main find fiscal abuse, something awful in the life of the main minister, right? This has happened. I'm old. This has happened dozens and dozens of times in my lifetime. And it's always like a surprise to the people in the church. It's the nature of the beast. When you have a large organization with a lot of expenses, money and power are going to be the primary driving forces of the organization. It's just the nature, because they have buildings to maintain. They have people to pay. So it's a little radical, but I say stay away. I have a bias towards a serious study and practice as women. What you find when you go to the teachings by big Dharma scholars on advanced teachings or in-depth teachings on scholarly topics is that it can be 95%. This is to Western audiences. It could be 95% male. Somewhere between 60 and 95% male. Why is that? Please study Buddhism. If you're not capable of focusing, and a lot of us for various reasons, too much internet use, ADD, trauma, and so forth, can't focus very well. First of all, you can take a book and read one line. A really, really good book. Have your teacher recommend the best book to read right then. One line, then meditate. One line, then go to sleep. Integrate it throughout your day. You don't need to be reading massive amounts of stuff. And secondly, we have YouTube. Of course, I'm not self-promoting. Many, many great teachers on YouTube. Do vet them, though. All right? Google's there is your friend. And so in doing that and studying and becoming a serious student of Dharma, you're not letting yourself be stereotyped in one category or another by the organization or the teacher, which is natural. That's the pretty girl. That's the old bat. That's the servant girl who brings the tea. Don't let yourself be put in a box like that. Ask intelligent questions. They don't have to be egghead questions, but ask questions and don't sit back like a passive loser in the back seat. Be actively engaged, and if you're saying your goal is to get from here to there, you should always be asking how. And if something isn't clear to you, you should be, even if it can't be answered right then, send a note back to the teacher and really get an answer to your questions. Because you're really important to them. People, they don't know that if there's even an organization with a few dozen people in it, they can't necessarily track what's going on with every single person all the time. So let them know that you're paying attention and you're serious about this, and the whole thing will totally open up for you. Unbelievable opportunities will occur for you, and that you apply to your own practice in your own daily life. So my final point, study the Bodhisattva Yana first, was the first. Focus and direct your practice and study towards what you want, what qualities you want to blossom. Study Buddhism, read books, ask serious questions. Avoid being stereotyped. Avoid Buddhist megachurches. That's point 4. Point 5 is definitely have respect for fully trained Tibetan lamas and Western lamas, teachers that means, Dharma scholars and monastics. But don't romanticize Tibetans, lamas, monastery life, or other Dharma students. They're all human beings, and they all have habits and they all have problems. And the great ones, you can see how they're handling their habits and their problems in beautiful ways that turn problems into some kind of awakening. And Tibetans are human beings, just like we are here in the United States, even though they're culturally different. So I hope that has been helpful to you, and I haven't seen any comments so far, so I'm just going to leave it at that, and I hope I haven't offended anyone. Respect to all. And there was one final thing I wanted to say. I love my Vajra sisters and brothers. That's what we call the people that we receive empowerment from and teachings from again and again in the same circle around a certain Lama. I have so many great friends who are like the best of men. And there's about 1% in the broader Dharma community that are super conservative about women's issues and think you should never talk about them. And in general, women should not be leaders. They might say otherwise, but all their actions show that, and they give a lot of unsolicited advice and talk down to you and this kind of thing. Just so you know, that happens. But don't let them drag you down. Just, if it goes on and on, just unfriend them from Facebook, block them, and so forth. Put up with it for a while and then just cut it off, because you don't need people disempowering you in your mission, because you have a mission. All right? All right, you take care now. Bye-bye.